Welcome to the Bright Insight podcast. This is a weekly show provided by Brightside Security Lab. We're talking about updates on security regulations, requirements, and perspectives on the current cybersecurity developments. Security is becoming more widely used and important at home, work, school, or in your personal life. Think about GDPR and the Cybersecurity Act. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. The more systems we secure, the more secure we all are. Thank you for listening to Bright Insight.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for joining this podcast. Today we have with us Mike Dow. He's Senior Product Manager on IoT Security from Silicon Labs. Thank you, Mike, for being with us today. Please, can you introduce to the audience your role in Silicon Labs as Senior Product Manager of IoT Security?
Sure. Thanks, Carlos. Thanks for having me here today. What I do for Silicon Labs is a couple of things. I'm on the platform security team. We basically look at all the security IP blocks that go into the silicon. And it takes roughly 2 to 3 years to bake a piece of silicon. So I have to look at the tea leaves, the security tea leaves, at least 5 to 7 years out and try to decipher what our customers are going to need, put it in silicon sometimes before they know they need it.
We can say you are in charge of the crystal ball.
That's correct. I have to look through the crystal ball and see what it says. Yes.
Now let me borrow your crystal ball for a minute, because we were talking about the different use cases that drive the need for showing evidence of that security capability on different kind of products. So we have compliance. At some point of time, somebody demand or required evidence of the functionality. Then we have people who do security evaluations for risk management. And of course, people who will look into the evidence of security as a market differentiator. Again, going back to your crystal ball, where do you see the IoT market evolving? Do you see any major trends? Or because you already mentioned by market, by application, that changes a bit, is slightly different approach.
So if you look at what's leading the market today, probably from a vertical perspective, consumer has a lot of interest in security, mainly because of the brand damage that can happen. There's also the consumer privacy things that are going on. Medical, is always been interested in security, but maybe not. It's mainly FDA driven and fear driven, right? The FDA can determine whether you make a product or don't make a product, and it goes to market. And then you have the smart energy market, which has been concerned about security for quite some time. I think what's going to drive it home is the regulations that are on the horizon, right? So now the governments are awake and have started looking at, Europe has had GDPR for quite some time. I think they led there as far as, privacy, data privacy, that sort of thing. But now they're looking at, okay, well, to keep that data private, you need to have security in place on the devices themselves. And there's starting to be discussions on IoT security with Etsy and so forth. And then NIST has, in the United States, has started looking at IoT security specifically. And you're starting to see legislation happen, right? So the states in the U.S. Have started to look at legislating things. California has led last year. They have a Consumer Privacy Act that went into effect. Oregon followed very closely. And this is how things happen in the United States. The states typically lead, and certain states are more progressive and they lead first. And then the government catches up later. But we're starting to see with the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act that was enacted late last year that affects only the U.S. government, you started to see in the government get it active in IoT security. And then there's been some movement on the Cyber Shield Act. It's came up last year. It came up again this year. Whether anything can get passed through our legislation is still a big question. But Biden just enacted a IoT cybersecurity directive, executive order, and that actually has some wording around IoT security specifically. So I think, there's certain verticals that drive security, but it's a very slow process, and really until the end consumer demands it, these verticals don't usually move very fast, but these regulations, I think, are going to push things very fast.
Now, there is one thing I forgot to mention at the very beginning, and is that you're also a member of the board of the IXT Alliance. So you're there together with Google, Amazon, and those folks looking to have also some program to show the evidence of the security of devices. How does it fit the IXT Alliance on this picture on the different requirements worldwide?
Yeah, so the thing that I think that IXT Alliance, its main value add is in creating unified security profiles or protection profiles, because the governments will pass laws. I think that will happen. They'll be a little fuzzy in what, most of these laws just basically say your product should be secure, and then they point to NIST or ETSI or some other standards body to basically define what is the security requirements themselves. And then we typically jump in our security world, we jump over to certifications like Common Criteria. Common Criteria has probably, and PCI are probably the most well-known security standards, PCI being payment card industry, which if you think about it, IoT security in payments has been around for almost 15 years now. And then Common Criteria for smart cards, which go into passports and credit cards, right? So those are the industries that have developed protection profiles or security profiles for different kinds of devices, silicon devices primarily reads on the silicon. But that's it. I mean, there's really no other security profiles. And this is what I think is basically missing, and the piece that IXT Alliance adds. And I've been a big proponent from the day I joined the board of IXT taking a leading role in defining the right amount of security per type of device. Because at the end of the day, these certification standards only standardize how you test, right? So they don't really specify the security of the device itself. They just say, give me what the security is for the device, the security target, or if it's genericized, the security profile, and then I will test that in a very rigorous, standardized way. And so what that leaves is this big gaping hole for what is the right amount of security for any particular vertical market. So if you take a home market, for instance, and you look at a simple on-off contact switch, wireless contact switch on a window, that type of device doesn't need a lot of security because it really just sends a 1 and a 0. Whereas your game controller or your Linux thermostat or your Wi-Fi gateway, all of those type of devices need a great deal of security. So really where we want to get to is where the consumer is confident when they pick up a device in the electronics store or they get it online, that they know it has the right amount of security for that type of device. And this is where security profiles come in. So I'm a big proponent of IXT Alliance primarily because it gives an opportunity, a place for the big 5 makers of a particular type of device to get in a room together and decide what is the right amount of security for that device. The other thing that IXT Alliance is really keen on is making sure that this certification process can scale. And there's some innovative things they're doing. One is that they're offering self-certification, which is great, but you have a lot of people who might abuse that. But they've created something which I think is unique to the industry, which is a certification bounty. So just like we have bounties for bug bounties, right? They're actually IXT Alliance. If you get certified and you self-certify, you are obligated to pay for certification bounties. And so this kind of is a way to allow people to get a lot of devices certified quickly and scale quickly, but also self-correct, right? Have a balancing mechanism as well.
So thanks, Mike, because from here I read 3 different messages. In one hand, I believe it's important the industry plays a role here, supporting the activities from governments, from institutions, looking to address the security requirements. And I think it's also in the benefit of in this industry to do that, because what we want to prevent is fragmentation. Fragmentation is a natural inhibitor for adoption, and I think it's important the market embrace security. Then there is the element of security being contextual. We have talked in the past, there's still this idea of this binary approach to security in some areas of the market, where people think that it needs to be as robust as the most secure product, or it's not secure enough. But it's good what you mentioned, that we need to understand security is contextual, and we need to do what is sensible. And finally, this element of scaling the certifications. And on that, I have a very specific question, because I know you have been certified under the PSA and CESIP, and at the same time, you're also working with the IoT Alliance, which is more oriented to devices. How do you connect those two words, the certification of components, certification of devices?
Yeah, so this is where the other concept I'm very keen on is inheritance. One thing I noticed in the PCI certification process, and I actually built some certified products. I built the simplest thing you can get certified, which is a keypad in the PCI industry, and it's very difficult. There's no real concept of inheritance, and when I say inheritance, I could get a certification on that pin pad, but I couldn't really get a component certification. So they only certified devices. And if you changed one line of code, you had to do a Delta certification. So it was very rigorous about the Delta certifications. And so no amount of certifications I did at a silicon level would really transfer and be able to be inherited by my customers. I think there's no way this industry can scale IoT security without the concept of inheritance. And so let me explain that a bit. So I spend, let's say for a standard CSIP / PSA level 3 certification, I may spend upwards of $120,000, $150,000 to get my silicon certified for that. That's a lot of money. I can't afford to do that if it doesn't bring value to my customers. And I can't bring value to my customers unless there's this concept of my certification can be inherited by those customers. For instance, you depend on a lot of things in silicon, like secure boot, secure debug. A lot of the requirements that are coming down from ETSI and NIST are requiring secure boot and secure debug. Locking the port. It's safe against glitching attacks and certain side channel attacks and things like that. And so what IOXT Alliance is doing is they are embracing the idea of inheritance. So what I can do, like if you look at the baseline IOXT security certification, which is kind of like the minimum bar you have to meet, there's root of trust, or are you executing code, what it is, and there's various test cases you do, and the highest level one is that you have a hardware root of trust, which is basically a ROM-based secure boot mechanism. So that's one of those things that's actually verified with a PSA or CSIP certification. And what IOXT is allowing you to do is, if you can show that you're using a chip that has been PSA certified, you get to check that box, and you get to inherit all of that goodness. Then they also have the concept of, okay, we can take that a step further and go even higher level with a module, a chip module, like a BLE module or a Zigbee module, where we already pre-certified the stack, right? And that's one of the things you have to check off in the IOXT Alliance, is that you are using a certified Zigbee stack or BLE stack. And at a module level, we can do things like preload a secure bootloader and some other things, right? So with the module level approach, I can even add more value to my customers by getting those modules IOXT certified to the base, or maybe even a NIST version or an ETSI version. And now when my customers use that module, they only have to when they go in to do their IOXT certification for like ETSI or 303645, and the NIST, then basically they just check the box, and all of the certifications I've already done, as long as my certifications are still valid, they get inherited, and now my customer only has to do a Delta certification. So this is how things will scale. This idea of inheritance, protection profiles, certification bounties, all of these things working together are what's going to allow this market to actually grow quickly and create very secure products.
When we put this stack together, I guess one of the things that you are looking to address, and we are looking to address together as an industry, is this element of fragmentation as well, right? Because there are so many standards, so many requirements, but at the same time, if we think, for example, on an RTOS or a crypto library or an MCU, the fact is that it's common across different kind of products and industries, right? So by doing this, we also address this complexity of the fragmentation, since this capability will serve different products, in different segments or in different regions, equally by providing that evidence, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there is fragmentation. I think we're seeing some consolidation. If you look at CSIP, for instance, which is what I call Common Criteria Light, and PSA, they're slightly different, but they have gotten together in a room and decided that there's a particular CSIP profile they can use that basically consolidates CSIP level 3 and level 2 with PSA level 2 and level 3, which is great because now I can do a combination certification. There is the NIST happening in the US, and then there's ETSI in Europe. But there's also ISO running in parallel, and maybe ISO has the potential to consolidate the NIST requirements and the ETSI requirements. So I think we have to work on consolidating things, right, where there's a common set of base requirements that are, maybe driven by the governments around the world. And then there is the idea of the protection profiles, which I think there's only organizations like IOXT or maybe DTSec or some other places where these protection profiles will actually be formulated. But if we can get consolidation of the protection profiles, we can get the standardization of how you test these protection profiles, and then we can get consolidation of the requirements themselves, then just imagine things become so much easier for device manufacturers because they essentially they can stack all of this stuff and it's all the same, and they can worry about their application. They can worry about securing their application because I can do all of this and they can still mess it up at the application level, right?
Yes, correct. But then at least we make sure that they have all the elements or the tools at hand to make secure applications.
That's a good way to put it. I like the analogy of a toolbox, right?
Yes.
We're creating the security toolbox for them.
Correct. And then it will simplify their life, at least in the way they approach security.
Right.
Great, Mike. Thank you very much. I really like this conversation. I think it's a great goal, a common goal that we are looking to address in the industry. Thank you for your time and your insights. Looking forward to having you here again in the future.
All right. Thanks a lot, Carlos. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Bright Insight. In the next episodes, we will cover different topics, such as the EU Cybersecurity Act, the business case of security evaluations, common criteria, CSIP, IoT, and software-based security. Stay tuned and subscribe on brightside.com.